Alright, so as you might have seen in that little intro, I ran into some issues in a previous video. For the video where I replaced the John Cooperworks center caps of the Mini Coupe, this was supposed to be a before clip for a nice before and after sequence. This was footage that I shot early on the day in harsh sunlight. As you might have seen in that video, I was able to salvage some of it, but it was not as I had intended the video to go. I wanted to have two similar sequences, a before and after, nicely transitioning into each other. Now that brings us to the next topic of ND filters. In the little intro you see me ordering my very first variable ND filter, more specifically this Polar Pro 6 to 9 stop variable ND filter. I'll also link it down below for you to check it out. For the people who are new to this or was unclear what went wrong, here's some of the footage that was not usable anymore at that moment. The details and the majority of the clip are blown out. Because of the harsh sunlight it was way too bright and I was not able to salvage it in post or capture it properly at that moment of the day with the equipment I had. So let's start off with what a variable ND filter or what a normal ND filter does. ND stands for neutral density. This is a type of gray filter that blocks light from hitting your lens. Now this might sound a bit counterproductive if all that you're trying to do with photography and videography is capturing light with your sensor. I completely understand that. I had the same first thought when I heard about these, but there are advantages to reducing light hitting the sensor. If you think about it, it's the same as adding a flash or continuous light to capture more light, but on the opposite side of your exposure settings. So where flash brings you faster shutter speeds and the ability to freeze motion, this gives you the ability to increase your shutter speed and capture more motion blur. Now let's take a look at how an ND filter works. Well, as the name states it's a neutral density filter. So an ND filter is a filter that reduces or modifies the intensity of all wavelengths and or colors of light equally. Now we see gray as a neutral color in the color spectrum. The more gray you add to a color, the darker it gets. And that's basically what this filter does. That's also why they're called gray filters sometimes. And the f-stop numbers are the intensity or amount that is added. I'll link a page below where they show this chart with the information what every step or stop does in more detail. So you can take a look at that for yourself. Here are some of the advantages of ND filters. So you can block incoming light. And this is basically for the other steps what you can do with it. So you can add motion blur with longer shutter speeds during daytime. So you can take long exposures. You can shoot wider apertures, for example f1.8 during the day and not overexpose your image. So you gain more depth of field. So although these are only 3 points I mentioned, they are all important and very versatile as selling points for ND filters. In practice this results in, for example, amazing landscape shots with motion blur and waterfalls during daytime. And because with an ND filter you have the range to set a longer shutter speed. You can shoot smooth cinematic shots and B-roll during daytime video shoots. For example with cars and rolling shots, and the ability to add the correct amount of motion blur. Because with an ND filter added to your setup, you can get that correct ratio of shutter speed and frame rate to get smooth cinematics. Now, as you might have seen, there are two types of ND filters. You have the static ND filters with one stop, or variable ND filters with multiple stops. And just so you know, there are cameras with built-in ND filters. These are filters which you can toggle on and off, but this is more of a video camera thing. So the first type is a single stop ND filter. These are ideal if you shoot under the same conditions more often and your settings and setup doesn't change that much. They are cheaper and only stop the amount of light that they are made for. Mostly you see ND filters go from 1 to 10 stops, but there are exceptions I've seen that even go up to 15 stops. There's one ND variant that is unique to static ones, as far as I know, and that's graduated ND filters. These are often used in landscape photography. I'll show an example here, and why you might want one of those. These ND filters are split in half, a clear part and an ND part. Because of this design, you can take landscape shots where you use the ND part on the sky to not overexpose details in the sky and properly expose the rest of the image at the same time. So you get more details in the sky instead of easily blowing them out. Now let's take a step back and look to the normal, so to say, ND filters. Say you're outside in the field shooting an amazing landscape shot for your portfolio, you're all set up and ready to go with your camera and you're using a 5-stop ND filter for some sweet motion blur in a stream of water. And the cloud starts blocking your sunlight. Now you have to adjust for that with either your settings or screw off your ND filter, find a different one with proper light blocking capabilities, like a 3-stop because you're lost light now for these new conditions. This is a good example where variable ND filters come in. If you had a 1 to 5 stop variable ND filter mounted, you could just have adjusted by twisting the filter and taking your shot. So no replacing filters or changing your settings at that moment. Just twist the filter 2 stops from 5 to 3 and you're good to go. Now this might be a landscape shooting situation that I used, but a variable ND filter makes you more versatile in quickly changing lighting conditions. This could be outside in the studio or somewhere else with changing lighting conditions. So you might also be quicker because you're not switching filters every time that the light changes. I hope that gives you some insights into ND filters, what they do and why they can be useful for you. Now I'll explain a bit why I chose this one and not a 1 to 5 stop as my first filter, because it might seem a bit of a weird choice as a first ND filter purchase to go for a 6 to 9 stop. For my use case, I will mainly use it outdoors and I want to mitigate excess light as much as possible in bright sunlight or daylight situations. So I'm going to try to explain this with some visual support. I hope I can explain this so it makes sense. So let's start off with my camera exposure capabilities. They are here. If I had a 1 to 5 stop filter, this would provide me with 5 extra stops. So I can now filter 6 to 9 extra stops of light with the filter I purchased. And I think I can quite easily, and with minimal data loss or correction, go 2 stops over or under. I could use and give up some aperture, shutter speed or ISO to get to these 2 stops. So I can stay close to my original settings with having the option to get 4 more stops of filtering capabilities than with only purchasing a 1 to 5 stop filter. This is also my first ND filter, so I'll see if I like it and how it works for me. And if it suits my needs, I will buy the 1 to 5 stop filter. Also, even if it's just for convenience in the long run. But I bought this one for €300. This is around the same price the 1 to 5 stop filter is. So I might get that one later, but this was my reason for buying this one now, and I hope that somehow makes sense. It provides me with more stops in my current situation and with minimal loss of a couple of my settings. Now here as a final example, I've created 2 clips where I set up the camera with the frame rate and the shutter speed to the ideal combination for natural motion blur, or what we also call cinematic shots that feel natural. So there are 2 clips. The first one is without an ND filter and ISO as low as possible, and the second clip uses the ND filter with the ISO set to 1000. And now any other settings that I would need to change in the first clip would impact my frame rate. As soon as I go to my aperture or shutter speed, I would change how I intended the shot to be. Also a quick tip if you're new to buying filters. Buy a filter for the lens with the largest filter thread that you have or you want to buy in the nearby future. And then use step-up rings to make it fit all to your other lenses. I'll also link the step-up ring I use from Polar Pro below. There are a lot of cheaper ones available. I'll also link an alternative, but I never used it, so I cannot talk about quality. I like the Polar Pro quality, and if you pay 300 euros or dollars for a filter, I want to make sure that I have decent quality step-up rings that work with that. And for me, I only use my ND and CPL filters on 2 lenses so far, the 24-70 f4 and the 70-200 f2.8 C Nikon lenses. If you don't know about CPL filters yet, then check out my other video I made before and you can learn about those. But for me, that's all I can tell you about ND filters. Let me know what you think about my choice and reasoning behind it, and what you would buy or what you currently use. I'm still new to the ND filters and video content game, and I'm ready to learn some new stuff from you as well. So that was it. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you like my content or think it was even a bit useful to you. And most importantly, have a nice day.